I saw some people making money on YouTube, and I wanted to go shoot guns and get the ammo paid for by a YouTube.
He spent 14 years building one of the most recognizable brands on YouTube by blowing things up. Then, at the height of his fame, Matt Carricker walked away from it all and sold the very land it was built on. This is not a story about failure. It is a story about a man who succeeded so completely that success itself became the thing he had to escape. To understand why Demolition Ranch ended, you first have to understand what it actually was underneath the explosions. Matt Carricker was born in 1986 and raised in Boerne, Texas, a small community northwest of San Antonio where the pace of life looked nothing like the internet machine he would later help define. His father, Dr. Lee Carricker, worked as a veterinarian, and that profession shaped the household Matt grew up in. It was not glamorous work. It was long hours, injured animals, worried owners, and the quiet discipline of showing up when something needed fixing. That upbringing mattered more than most casual viewers ever realized, because the man who would later become famous for destroying things was, underneath it all, trained to repair them. Matt followed his father's path to Texas A&M University, enrolling in the College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, working toward a license to practice veterinary medicine. While still a student in 2011, he started a YouTube channel almost as a side experiment, filming himself shooting firearms in unconventional ways, testing what materials could stop a bullet, and turning ordinary curiosity into short, chaotic videos. One of his earliest uploads, in which he fired a shotgun into a computer monitor, captured the tone that would define the channel for over a decade: irreverent, unpolished, and strangely charming. What made Demolition Ranch different from the wave of firearm channels that followed was that Matt never let the internet fully consume him, at least not at first. As the channel grew and the pressure to upload more and bigger content increased, he made a decision that revealed exactly where his priorities stood. He stepped back from filming to finish veterinary school. He became Dr. Matt Carricker, returned to practicing medicine, and only then returned to building his channel. That single choice gave him something almost no other creator in his position had: a professional identity that did not depend on an algorithm. If YouTube disappeared tomorrow, Matt Carricker still had a license, a skill, and a life beyond the camera. That distinction matters more than it might seem, because so many internet careers are built on a foundation that could vanish overnight. His was not. That foundation is part of why Demolition Ranch grew into something far larger than a single channel. By the mid-2010s, it had become one of the defining names in the online firearms community, sometimes called GunTube, a loose network of reviewers, collectors, and experimenters. But Matt separated himself by refusing to stay narrow. He was knowledgeable about firearms without being dry, and he built a personality around curiosity rather than instruction. Viewers who had no interest in tactical training still tuned in because the appeal was universal. What happens if you try this? That question, repeated across thousands of videos, turned into an entertainment empire. There was Off the Ranch, which gave fans a more personal look into his family life, his properties, and his business ventures. There was Bunker Branding, a merchandise and screen printing company that grew far beyond simple t-shirts into a serious operation with staff, inventory, and logistics of its own. And there was the Desperado Resort, a 350-acre property in Boerne that became one of his largest real-world investments, a physical extension of the brand he had built online. What started as one man with a camera slowly became something closer to infrastructure: warehouses, contracts, employees, and constant expectation. But the most important piece of that ecosystem, the one that revealed who Matt actually was when the cameras were not focused on spectacle, was Vet Ranch. Launched in 2014, Vet Ranch used YouTube revenue and viewer donations to fund medical treatment for shelter animals, working in connection with organizations like San Antonio Pets Alive. The format was simple: show the rescue, show the surgery, show the recovery, and let the video help pay for the next animal in need. It was the opposite of Demolition Ranch in almost every way. Where one channel was loud and destructive, the other was quiet and restorative. Together, they told the full story of a man who could break things for entertainment and heal things for survival, sometimes in the very same week. Vet Ranch never needed to escalate the way Demolition Ranch did. It did not need bigger explosions or more expensive props to hold an audience. It only needed another animal that needed help, and Matt kept showing up for that part of his work long after the rest of his channels began to feel heavier than they used to. For years, that balance seemed sustainable. But by 2020, everything about Matt's world began to shift. In March of that year, his brother, Mark Carricker, died of cancer. That loss is often mentioned briefly in accounts of Matt's story, but it deserves far more weight than it typically receives. Losing a sibling is not like losing a colleague or a public connection. A sibling remembers who you were before the fame, before the brand deals, before the cameras ever existed. When someone like that is gone, time itself starts to feel different. It becomes finite in a way it never did before. Those close to Matt have described a noticeable shift in how he approached his work and his family in the years that followed, a growing sense that the years with his wife Meredith and their children, Addie, Annie, and Lincoln, were not unlimited. Grief has a way of rearranging priorities quietly, without announcement, until one day the old ambitions simply do not weigh as much as they used to. Then came the platform itself. By 2024, YouTube had tightened its policies around firearm content significantly compared to the environment Matt entered back in 2011. In June of that year, YouTube updated its firearms policy again, introducing age restrictions on content involving automatic weapons, homemade firearms, high-capacity magazines, and accessories like suppressors. For a channel built almost entirely around firearm experimentation, that kind of restriction was not a minor inconvenience. It directly affected recommendations, discoverability, and monetization, threatening the very mechanics that had allowed Demolition Ranch to reach millions of new viewers year after year. The platform that had helped build the empire was no longer the same platform, and creators across the firearms space felt that shift closing in around them. Loyal fans could still find the channel, but new viewers, the lifeblood of long-term growth, would have a harder time discovering it at all. Then, in July 2024, a moment occurred that no amount of planning could have prepared Matt for. At a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, Thomas Matthew Crooks attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump. In the chaos that followed, images from the scene spread across the world, and observers noticed something that instantly pulled Matt's name into a story he had no connection to. Crooks was reportedly wearing Demolition Ranch merchandise. There was no evidence that Matt knew him, had any relationship with him, or bore any responsibility beyond the coincidence of a shirt. But in the modern media landscape, association does not require logic to become a crisis. Matt responded publicly, expressing shock and condemning violence, but there was no clean way to navigate a moment like that. Silence looked evasive. Speaking too much amplified the story. It was a no-win situation, and for a brand built over more than a decade specifically to avoid political entanglement, it may have been the moment that made the cost of visibility undeniable. A logo, it turns out, can travel much farther than the intentions behind it ever could. None of these pressures alone fully explains what happened next. But together, they created a weight that was difficult to keep carrying. According to statements Matt made around the time of his retirement, he and Meredith sat down and had a conversation about their children, about how the years when Addie, Annie, and Lincoln would still be living at home were limited, and about what it would mean to keep prioritizing an ever-expanding content machine over that shrinking window of time. It was not framed as a business decision. It was framed as a time decision. Fame can multiply money and opportunity, but it cannot buy back the specific years when your children still want you around. Once those years pass, they do not come back the way an old video can be replayed. In January 2025, Matt posted a video announcing he was selling the ranch. That single act said more than any ordinary retirement statement could have. He was not simply stepping back from filming. He was selling the physical infrastructure that had become inseparable from the brand itself, the Desperado Resort, listed for millions, along with the businesses and staff and constant maintenance that came with running an entertainment empire built on land. 4 long-time viewers, that felt different from a typical creator hiatus. This was someone dismantling the stage itself, not just stepping off it for a while. The final videos on Demolition Ranch carried the same loud, familiar energy the channel had always had, but underneath it was something else entirely. Everyone watching understood this was the end. Off the Ranch offered a softer, more personal farewell, one that reflected years of viewers watching Matt's children grow up in real time, alongside his businesses and his struggles. What made his exit unusual in the world of online creators is that he left while the audience was still there, while the brand was still respected, while the channel was, by every measurable standard, still thriving. Most creators fade slowly, buried by an algorithm or worn down by scandal. Matt left on his own terms, which in the attention economy is one of the rarest exits there is. What did not end was just as revealing as what did. Vet Ranch continued, still connected to the veterinary training Matt earned years before Demolition Ranch ever existed, still tied to rescue work that never needed escalation to matter. In the end, the guns went quiet not because the channel failed, but because the man behind it decided that presence with his family was worth more than another upload, another viral video, another year feeding a machine that had already given him everything it could offer. It is a rare kind of ending, one built not on collapse but on clarity, and perhaps that is exactly why it still resonates with so many who watched him grow.